The last act in the European theater of operations. Hitler is in a greater German empire that now consists of a cut-off set of troops near Riga in Latvia, the area around Berlin, and other parts of central Germany that have not yet been captured by the Russians or by the Americans. But as time goes on, this is going to get smaller and smaller. The Russians break across the Oder River. I'm sorry, I'm doing it over here in Warsaw. My bad. The Russians are right near Berlin. The Americans are right near also. And what to do? Hitler says, what to do? Well, his people have been preparing a redoubt for him in Bavaria, in southern Germany, near the Berchtesgaden mountaintop resort that was built for him. But Hitler decides, no, I'm going to fight and die if I need to die in Berlin, but I'm going to count on something mystical. My horoscope says, and Hitler was crazy for astrology, my horoscope says that a great event will happen that will save us. As the Russians cross the Oder, and as the city of Berlin is now isolated from the rest of the world, as the Americans and the Russians meet up at Torgau, as the area of Germany that isn't allied shrinks more and more and more, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, fourth-term president of the United States, dies at Warm Springs, Arkansas. Now, Hitler's role model is Frederick the Great, King of Prussia. And when Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, was losing in the 7 Years' War, the death of a Russian leader creates an opportunity that Frederick is able to exploit to turn things around and ultimately win the war. Hitler is convinced that the death of Franklin Roosevelt is the sign. It's his Frederick the Great moment. And he is going to be able to convince the British and the Americans to stop fighting him and join him in fighting the Bolsheviks, join him in fighting the Soviet Russians. When that doesn't work out, Hitler truly falls apart. Now, the beginning of his collapse happened just after D-Day in the summer of 1944. In the summer of 44, Germany's generals, who had plotted no less than 6 times to get rid of Hitler over the years, finally realized that the Allies are in France and they're in Poland and they're coming for us. And if we don't kill Hitler first, the Allies are going to destroy Germany totally. So a plot of Germans, the Valkyrie plot, is organized with the help of Pope Pius XII and the Roman Catholic Church, along with a series of German army officers who have connections to the Roman Catholics organizations within Germany that tend to be anti-Nazi, as well as an anti-Nazi cell within the German Admiralty, led by an admiral named Canaris. In this plot, a young colonel, a Prussian nobleman named Count Klaus von Stauffenberg, who has lost an eye, an arm, and basically has damage along the entire side of his body, who is a staff officer, agrees to be the key person. This involves bringing a bomb in a briefcase to the Wolf's Lair, the Hitler base in East Prussia near Rostenburg. Because he's a staff officer well known to be part of the general staff that reports to Hitler, he's allowed in and his briefcase is not searched. But he's not Japanese. He's not a suicide bomber. He's not an Islamist today. He intends to live. So The meeting was originally going to be held in a bomb-proof shelter underground, and the bomb was designed to fill that room with absolute death. But it's a hot, stinking hot, muggy day in the swamps of East Prussia. So the meeting is moved to a cabin, more open, much more airy. The windows are open. The pressure effects of the bomb are going to be much, much less. Now, during the meeting, Stauffenberg is supposed to be called away for an urgent phone call, and he has activated the device, the bomb. It's ticking off, and he leaves to take the phone call and then escapes. But he has placed the briefcase on the side of a table leg facing Hitler. There's this massively heavy boardroom table that's being used by Hitler and his generals for a map table, and they're going over the maps and stuff like that. Well, another officer takes Stauffenberg's place, barks his foot, talk about accidents of history, barks his foot on the briefcase, takes the briefcase, lifts it up, puts it on the other side of the table leg so it's not standing to him, right in his way. And then, as Stauffenberg is going out the gates, boom! Now, an explosion, like many things in life, follows the path of least resistance. Had the bomb been on the correct side of the table leg that Stauffenberg placed it on, the prime focus of the blast would have went towards Hitler. Had the meeting still been held in the bomb shelter, the center of the blast would have killed everyone in the room. But because it was in the cabin, open, and because it was on the wrong side of the table leg, the force of the blast is away from Hitler. He comes out looking like Wile E. Coyote super genius after one of the explosions in a Roadrunner cartoon. He is partially deaf for the rest of his life, has some partial paralyzation, which causes his hand, one of his hands, to tremble uncontrollably. But he's alive. Stauffenberg doesn't know this. The plot takes off in Berlin, and in summer 1944, it looks like Hitler has been assassinated by his own generals, and it looks like Germany is about to surrender to the Allies without the invasion of Germany happening, and without the bloodiest phase of the war in Europe happening, at least the bloodiest phase outside of Stalingrad. But instead of being dead, Hitler makes a radio broadcast. He greets Mussolini, who's coming to visit him, and it becomes clear that Hitler is still alive. This gives the security forces of the SS opportunity to arrest the plotters. Klaus von Stauffenberg is killed that night. His last words are, "Long live Holy Germany." In Tom Cruise's Valkyrie movie, it's changed to "Long live Sacred Germany," and Stauffenberg's connection to the Roman Catholic Church's plot against Hitler is downplayed. But Pius XII, the Pope, authorized this, and the Church was very involved, and Stauffenberg was a devout Catholic. Long live Holy Germany. He's shot. His fellow conspirators were not given the same quick death. Most of them were strung up on piano wire, attached to meat hooks. And Hitler would, for recreation, watch movies of these generals being, piano wire is really thin, being hoisted up on piano wire and twitching and twitching and twitching until the piano wire cut through their throat or until they died of strangulation, whichever came first. This was Hitler, being at his worst. So Hitler wasn't the same man that he was after this plot. Now, the only person that was allowed to die with dignity is Rommel. General Rommel was on the outside of this plot. He had left Africa. He had been wounded in France by an American air attack while he was in a staff car, and he was sort of distantly involved. If the plot worked, he would be happy to take over Germany, but he was not a leader. But because Hitler had made Rommel into a hero to the German people, the thought of Rommel joining the anti-Hitler plot would have been very bad for morale, as far as Hitler was concerned. So Rommel had a visit at home when one of his sons was there, I think maybe both of his sons, and his wife was there, and he was basically offered the opportunity to commit suicide. and his family would not be harmed. A lot of the other generals' families were being destroyed. Rommel, yeah, Rommel's going to kill himself, no question. And his wife and sons are going to survive him. So Hitler is already damaged as a result of this. His last days in the bunker are recounted very well by a series of movies, The Last Days of Adolf Hitler with Alec Guinness, and Downfall, particularly the movie Downfall, which has the guy who played Martin Luther's father superior in the monastic order, who was a very gentle guy who kept bees, if you remember the Luther movie, playing Adolf Hitler. The most famous scene in that is now a extremely famous meme on the internet where Hitler loses this. Well, this actually happened. Hitler did not lose it all the time. But when a General Steiner failed to appear where Hitler thought, because Steiner didn't have an army and Hitler thought he should, Hitler was living in Kukuland at this time. He was moving armies to protect Berlin that really didn't exist anymore, and nobody had the guts to tell Hitler. Well, finally they told him, Steiner's not coming. And Hitler loses it. Well, that scene is recounted many, many different ways. And I'll probably include one way in one of the associated materials. Finally, on his last day, the Russians are less than a block away from the Fuehrerbunker, which is under the Reichschancellery, which is this underground bomb-proof shelter. Moldy and smelly, but it's survivable. Hitler finally marries his longtime mistress, Eva Braun. Within an hour of their marriage, she has taken poison, and he has taken his Walther pistol and swallowed the barrel and shot himself. Hitler's suicide is followed by the suicide of the entire Goebbels family. Joseph Goebbels, this poisonous dwarf as he was known by his enemies, had a wife, Magda, and a bunch of beautiful children. Magda killed the children with poison. Then she and Goebbels killed themselves. Now, when Hitler's body was found, it was taken out, doused with gasoline, and burned pretty thoroughly. And so was Eva Braun's. The Goebbels family was not so lucky. There wasn't enough gasoline to do it justice. So they were burned, but they were very recognizable after being burned. Finally, Hitler's death results in power being transferred not to Hermann Goering, who at the last Hitler thought was a traitor, because he had been doing some double dealing with the Allies, not to Heinrich Himmler, the head of his police state, the SS, because Himmler had been doing a lot of dealing with the Allies, but to Admiral Karl Dönitz, the head of the U-boat campaign. Hitler's comment was, "At least the Navy never let me down." Dönitz continues the fight for a couple of days, but ultimately surrenders to the Allies and to the Russians. And VE Day in Europe, Victory in Europe Day, is May the 8th, 1945, and the war in Europe is over. Next week, we will look at the end of World War II in Asia and the beginning of the genocide.